take your thumbnail picture now. Yeah, it's really stupid, but could be worse. I'm going to read you a little story at the beginning of chapter 6. If you have the book, go grab it. If not, no big, huge thing. This is for you. And if you feel that there is someone in your life, maybe it's you, maybe it's a close friend, a family member, struggling with those deep scars, those things that you wish so much you could just get rid of, that you could just forget, that God could just make it like it never happened. Please go get them. If this is for you, please listen up. This is God kind of took me on a little bit of a, what do you call it, scenic route, rabbit trail, a different path this morning, and this is so important. So I'm going to dive right into here. I'm going to start with a story from chapter 6 of Great Love for Life. It's actually from the Bible. This is about one of King David's sons and daughters, although they were step siblings because so goofy, they had so many wives back then. That's a whole other issue. But so let's dive into this. Amnon watched Tamar, noting the curves of her body through her flowing gown. His blood boiled when he considered how close she was, the object of his sexual fantasies. For years, he had watched her bloom from child to voluptuous woman. Other women were eager for his attentions, but he only had eyes for Tamar. The fact she was his half-sister, well, surely that minor factor could be overlooked. After all, Amnon's father was the king. The king made the laws. As a prince, surely laws made to govern peasants would not apply to him. Amnon smiled as he considered his own genius plan. He had to lie he was feeling ill, knowing the soft-hearted Tamar would rush to his side to ease his suffering by preparing his favorite meal. The door to his room was closed. The servants were gone. Tamar brought a platter of steaming food to him, bending down to bring a bite to his mouth. Amnon's hand shot out and grabbed Tamar's wrist, causing the platter to crash to the floor. Though Tamar struggled and screamed in fright, nothing could stop Amnon's lust. Boom. Let's just dive in right there. Unfair, unearned, horrific, somebody else's sin, somebody else's lust, visited on somebody who did nothing to earn it. And this is not the only kind of pain and crap and grief and stuff that we go through in this life. Grief is horrific. I have several friends who have lost their beloved husbands and have shared with me the ongoing turmoil of that. I have several friends who have been single their whole life, even though they've felt God's called them to, long for marriage. What's up with that? We have a daughter who's struggling with her health. And where is that place where you stand, where the scars are still so prominent, and yet we can know beyond a shadow of doubt that God is a loving God, that he never leaves us, he never forsakes us. How do you stand in the middle of that? I started in to cover this chapter thinking that I was going to kind of focus on Amnon, on how, right after all of that happened, he suddenly despised Tamar. Why was that? Well, my guess is that every time he thought of Tamar, he remembered what a monster he had been. She was a constant reminder of his sin, of his cruelty. The pain in her eyes would have been just shooting darts into him. So he was like, keep her out of my sight. I don't want to think about that anymore. The perfect narcissistic point of view. You hurt me when I look at you and I remember what I did to you. Wow. So selfish, so horrific. So we can't always rely on that person's going to come to me and repent, then I'll forgive them. How do you move forward if that's never offered? When grief happens, when separation from your loved ones happens, death in this physical realm is final. There's ways that God blesses and comforts. Jesus made it so clear in the Beatitudes, in his amazing famous Sermon on the Mount, that A lot of times you can come to some of those statements and go, "What the heck was he saying?" You're blessed when you mourn because you'll be comforted. You're blessed when you're poor in spirit. You're blessed when, you have when you're pure in heart, you'll see God. It just sounds like one riddle after another. But especially right now when we talk about when you mourn, you will be comforted. And what is up with where Paul says, "My strength," God said to him, "My strength is perfected in your weakness." Because Paul had prayed over and over. There's many suppositions as to what could have been Paul's deep pain that was not taken away. What was his thorn in the side? Well, I just want to kind of put a mirror up to all of us. We've all got some kind of thorn in the side. Sometimes it may seem so horrific that it may seem like there's no hope for healing for this particular thorn. I am just shattered. Where do we go from there? There's a part that I talk about in chapter 6 where it says, "If I step on a rusty nail, the wound might not appear serious on the outside," especially when you're talking about sexual sin. It's like it's a deep puncture that inserts deep poison. What do you do with those kind of wounds? In the natural world, we step on a nail, we get a tetanus shot. There are ways to progress from there. What do we do when the wound is so deep and so pervasive that we feel like I've been poisoned throughout my system? My spirit, mind, and body have been poisoned by this event, by this PTSD from what somebody else did. There's so many vets who have gone through war and are literally are walking wounded, whether their wounds show on the outside anymore. How do we proceed? How do we say, "I've got faith in God," when our scars are so pervasive and so apparent? And why? Here's what really blew my mind. There's a lot more I can cover here. I'll put more in the notes. But as I was struggling with this, praying about this, lifting up different people that I love with all my heart this morning who, have those deep scars. And there's areas in my life where I have those deep scars. We don't tend to put those on our sleeve as, "This is I'm so proud of this. This is my identity." We don't want to take that on as our identity, but also we don't want to isolate ourselves. But as I said, I'll put more of the notes in my notes for this video. But something that kind of blew my mind this morning as I was praying, I thought about this before. Who suffered throughout all time. I mean, maybe you can go, "You can't really understand what I've been through because you did not go through it with me. You were not raped the way I was. You were not abused as a child like I was. You did not see bombs falling everywhere. You did not see people dismembered in a war. You have not dealt with this ongoing physical pain day in, day out that has just sapped me of joy and hope and seems to have sapped my future." We can't always find somebody who knows exactly what we've suffered. So we can tend to isolate ourselves and say, "They can't understand, so I'm gonna just shut down. I'm gonna hide that pain. I'm gonna shove it down. I'm gonna just put this in this big closet, like this big storage container over here, and hope that nobody will see it." But it's like that monster just grows. Those are perfect conditions. The dampness, like bacteria that grows, like that mold that grows best in a damp, hidden, warm wall, and we can ignore it, but we're being slowly poisoned by it, aren't we? Okay, to get to the point, sorry I rabbit trail. It blew my mind this morning when I was struggling through and praying about this, and God just went, "Who is our example of what to do with the deep scars that just seem to remain? Who is our example of one who has suffered more than we could ever understand and did not earn it, did not deserve it, did nothing to earn this?" Okay, Jesus. Jesus. He has been tempted like we have without sin, but he has suffered more than we could ever understand, took on the sin of the whole world, all of our pain, all of our weakness, all of our diseases on his body, flayed beyond an inch of his life, spit on, cursed at, stripped, just horrific. And he knew what was coming. You know what? He was honest. He was honest with God. He said, look, if there is any other way, let this pass from me. And he was honest, even when he was on the cross, bleeding from innumerable wounds. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? He felt absolutely forsaken. But did God point at that and say that's sin? No, Jesus never sinned, but he was straight with God. He was honest with God. And I'm still getting to the part that absolutely blew my mind. Jesus was laid in a grave, and on the third day he rose, resurrected from all of that. He chose to forgive. He never sinned. God broke the chains of death and sin and sickness and all of that by what Jesus did. But you know what? Jesus came out of that grave. He still had the scars. They were still on his body, in his side, in his feet, in his hands. The scars were still there. And part of me was like, God, you're so powerful. You flooded his body with resurrection power. Why did you leave those scars? But those very scars are what Jesus used to go, hello, disciples. It really is me. Look, here's the scars. You saw what I went through. Put your hand, doubting Thomas, put your hand in my side. It's me. That's really me. That's my scar. Our scars can become God's victorious battle wounds. Yes, we need to forgive, even those who do not deserve it, even those who never ask for it, even ourselves. If we look back and we say, you know what, I think I was stupid. I was ignorant. I was naive. I fell into that trap. I chose to do something so dumb. Well, stop flogging yourself. It's been paid for. And we choose to forgive even those who don't deserve forgiveness, who have never asked for it. We choose to forgive because it cuts that line of poison to us. We even choose to forgive God, though he never deserves for us to hold a grudge against him. But we can have that grudge deep down going, kind of like, yeah, I've still got my scars. That happened even though you're supposed to be all powerful, God. Where were you? Bring that poison. Be straight with him, be honest, just like Jesus did. It's like, be real with God. Don't hide from him. Do not isolate. Forgive. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Very true. And then be okay if the scars remain. We choose to forgive how many times? Over and over and over. Just because the feelings come back does not mean that God doesn't have the power to help us forgive. How many times do we grieve for those we lost, who we love? Over and over and over. It may come back in a different way, in a different form. Those scars, that memory may still be there, but how many times does God help us forgive? How many times does God comfort us in our grief? Over and over and over. How many times do you need it? Over and over. He's always with you. Over and over. In that moment of despair, he's with you now. He has not left you. Turn to him, even if it feels like it's going to shred your mind and your spirit to even think of facing God. The shame, the guilt, the hatred, the bitterness, the grief. I may not get everything you've gone through. Support groups are great because you can start sharing that common ground. But Jesus is the only one who can always be there with you. Let his scars heal you right now. Let the scars that God chose to leave on his body remind you that he gets it, that you are loved beyond belief. That's why he took them on. You are loved beyond belief. Even when you reject him, even when you may not even like God at the moment, even when you may not understand a thing, even when you think you have abandoned me, tell him, be real. He is so kind, so gracious. Father, I lift all of this to you. This is beyond me, but you are there where I cannot be. You can relate. You can join your scars to our scars, wherever those scars are, whether it's ongoing pain in our heart, in our spirit, in our mind, the horror, Lord, of things that go on in this world. You can handle it when we can't. So, Father, I ask that you would bind our scars to yours, that like those vessels that get remade by solid gold filling every crack, Lord, that you would make us your stained glass windows, that we wouldn't run from our pain, we wouldn't hide our scars, but that we would open them up to you, that we would trust you with them and let you transform them to agents of healing to others who struggle and are in pain, all around us who are probably hiding horrific scars as well. In Jesus' name, many blessings. I will see you tomorrow as I try to sign off. I would love to hear what you think